Welcome back, everyone. I am Dr. Flux, and this is General Psychology. Today, we're beginning Module 10, which is Personality and Social Influence. And in this lecture, we're going to be diving into the topic that touches every single one of us, personality. Think about it. What makes you different from your friends, your classmates, or even your siblings? Why do some people thrive in social settings while others prefer solitude? What drives our quirks, our habits, our unique ways of navigating the world? These questions have fascinated psychologists, and honestly most humans in general, for centuries. But defining personality isn't as straightforward as it might seem. At its core, personality refers to the unique set of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that persist over time and across situations. It's what makes you, you. But here's a twist. The way we understand personality has evolved dramatically over time. And today, we're going to explore some of the historical heavyweights who laid the groundwork for how we think about personality, even if their ideas were, well, let's just say, a bit out there by today's standards. Before we jump into the fascinating world of personality theories, let's do a quick recap of Module 9 to keep everything fresh. Which of the following therapies focuses on identifying and changing negative thought patterns? Is it A, psychoanalytic therapy, B, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, D, dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, or D, humanistic therapy? If you picked B, CBT, you've got it. Cognitive behavioral therapy is about recognizing and changing those unhelpful thought patterns to improve mental health. Let's do another one. Which of the following is considered a holistic approach to mental health treatment? Is it A, antipsychotic medication, B, mindfulness and meditation, C, electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, or D, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT? If you said mindfulness and meditation, you're on the right track. Holistic approaches look at the whole person, integrating mind, body, and environment for overall well-being. All right, now let's turn the spotlight to some of those pioneers of personality psychology. Today, we'll be covering some of the big names and ideas in the history of personality. We're going to be diving into Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and discussing the complexities of the tools they innovated, projective tests. Then we'll do some summary and review. Now, you might be wondering, why do we even need to study these old school theories? Aren't they outdated? And that's a fair question. But here's the thing. Even though many early personality theorists have been criticized or revised over time, they laid the foundation for everything we know today. They were the first attempts to scientifically understand what makes us tick. Plus, their influence goes way beyond psychology. You've probably heard of things like Freudian slips or the Oedipus complex, or maybe archetypes in movies and books, even if you didn't realize that they came from these early thinkers. Now, we're definitely going to critique these theories, and we'll also see how they shaped our understanding of personality and why they still matter in modern psychology. So let's start with the man who practically invented the field of personality psychology, Sigmund Freud. Love him or hate him, you can't talk about personality without talking about Sigmund Freud. His ideas about the unconscious mind, psychosexual development, and defense mechanisms were revolutionary and controversial. So grab your metaphorical couch and let's dive into Freud's world of repressed desires, childhood conflicts, and of course, the infamous id, ego, and superego. Freud's theories were wildly influential and equally controversial. He was obsessed with the idea that much of what drives our behavior is buried deep in the unconscious mind, a place where repressed desires, fears, and unsolved conflicts lurk. Now, whether you think Freud was a genius or just obsessed with sex, his ideas shaped the way we think about personality, therapy, and even culture. Freud imagined the mind like an iceberg. What you see on the surface, your conscious thoughts, is just the tip. But lurking underneath the water is a massive unconscious world full of repressed desires, fears, and unresolved conflicts. Freud divided the psyche into 3 parts. The id is your primal instinctual side. It's the part of you that wants instant gratification. Think of it like a toddler screaming for candy. It wants it right now without considering the consequences. The ego is the rational mediator. It balances the id's wild desires with the reality of the world around you. The ego figures out how to get what you want without causing chaos. It's like the negotiator between your inner toddler and the adult world. And the superego is your moral compass. is the voice in your head that tells you what's right and what's wrong, based on societal norms and values. It's like a stern parent or a teacher inside your mind, making you feel guilty for even thinking about doing something bad. In Freud's model, the ego is constantly juggling the demands of the id and the superego, trying to keep the peace. And according to Freud, the internal conflict shapes our entire personality. Freud also believed that our personality is shaped by how we navigate a series of psychosexual stages during childhood. This would definitely be one of the more controversial aspects of his theory today. Freud thought that sexual energy played a huge role in personality development, even in babies and toddlers. So here's the quick rundown. The oral stage, which lasts from birth to about 1 year of age, is all about the mouth. Babies get pleasure from sucking, biting, and chewing. If this stage isn't navigated well, say if a baby's weaned too early, Freud believed it could lead to an oral fixation in adulthood, like smoking, overeating, or being overly talkative. The anal stage, from ages 1 to 3, focuses on toilet training and control over bodily functions. This is where the idea of being anal retentive comes in. Freud thought that overly strict toilet training could lead to perfectionism and obsessiveness. On the flip side, anal expulsive personalities are messy and disorganized. The phallic stage, which is from age 3 to 6, is where things get really Freudian. This stage focuses on the genitals and the infamous Oedipus complex, the idea that boys unconsciously desire their mothers and see their fathers as rivals. Freud also proposed an Electra complex for girls, though he was less clear on the details, which has also led to a lot of criticism. Then there's the latency stage, which lasts from around age 6 to puberty. It's a period of calm, where sexual impulses are repressed and children focus on social and intellectual development. Finally, there's the genital stage, which is from puberty onward. It's where mature sexual interests develop, and Freud believed that your adult personality develops on how well you resolved conflicts in the earlier stages. This is the stage where Freud believed that sexual interests outside of family dynamics develop and contribute to how we move through the world. Freud thought that if you got stuck or if you fixated at any of these stages, it could lead to specific personality traits or issues in adulthood. To help manage the constant tension between the id, ego, and superego, Freud believed we unconsciously use defense mechanisms, mental strategies that protect us from anxiety and uncomfortable thoughts. On the screen you can see a full list of the common defense mechanisms, but let's just break down a few of the most well-known ones. Repression is when you push distressing thoughts into the unconscious. It's like your mind's delete button, but it's more like hiding files in a folder that you forgot about. Denial is flat out refusing to accept reality. That can't be true. It's like pretending you didn't just bomb that test, or ignoring the red flags in a relationship. Projection is when you attribute your own feelings to someone else. They're the one who's angry, not me. It's like accusing someone of being jealous when deep down you're actually the jealous one. Sublimation is actually kind of positive. It's when you channel unacceptable impulses into something productive, like I'm turning my rage into a killer workout. Displacement is when you take out your emotions on a safer target, like being mad at your boss but instead snapping at your roommate. While these defense mechanisms can help protect us from emotional distress in the short term, overusing them can make it harder to confront and work through difficult emotions in the long run. Now, let's be real. Freud's theories have faced a lot of criticism. First, there's his overemphasis on sexuality. While Freud believed that sexual development was at the core of personality, many modern psychologists see this as excessive and outdated. Not everything comes back to repressed desires for your parents. Then there's the lack of empirical evidence. Many of Freud's ideas can't be scientifically tested or proven. Modern psychology is all about evidence-based practices, and Freud's theories often don't hold up under that kind of scrutiny. But here's the thing. Despite these criticisms, Freud's impact on culture, literature, and therapy is undeniable. Concepts like the unconscious mind and defense mechanisms remain foundational in psychology, even if the details of his theories had been revised or rejected. So, love him or hate him, Freud's ideas laid the groundwork for how we think about personality today. But of course, he wasn't the only voice in the room. Next, we'll discuss Carl Jung, who took Freud's ideas and expanded them in fascinating new directions. But first, let's do a quick attention check. Which part of Freud's psyche operates on the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification? Is it A, the ego, B, the id, C, the superego, or D, the preconscious? If you picked B, id, you nailed it. The id is all about those primal desires. It wants what it wants right now. The ego and the superego are there to keep it in check. While Freud was busy diving into the depths of repressed desires and childhood conflicts, Carl Jung had his own vision of the unconscious mind, one that was less about sexuality and more about spirituality, mythology, and the idea that we're all connected through something bigger than ourselves. Jung didn't just tweak Freud's ideas, he took them in an entirely different direction, introducing concepts like archetypes and the collective unconscious. His theories have also had widespread influence, guiding topics from psychology to literature, film, and even pop culture. So let's step into Jung's world and see how he expanded our understanding of personality. Carl Jung started as Freud's protege, but it didn't take long for them to realize that they were on very different pages. Freud believed the unconscious was mostly a dark place, filled with repressed desires, especially sexual ones. Where Freud focused on the individual and their personal conflicts, Jung saw the unconscious as something shared, a kind of psychological inheritance passed down through generations. This difference in perspective eventually caused a professional split between the two. Freud thought Jung was drifting into mysticism, while Jung felt Freud's theories were too narrow and reductive. But despite their differences, both of their ideas have shaped how we think about the mind and personality today. Jung believed in two levels of the unconscious. The personal unconscious, which is similar to Freud's idea. It's filled with repressed memories, experiences, and thoughts that are unique to you. This is where your personal baggage hangs out. But then Jung introduced the idea of the collective unconscious, and this is where things get interesting. According to Jung, the collective unconscious is like a shared psychological library that all humans tap into. It's filled with archetypes, universal symbols, and themes that pop up in stories, myths, and religions across different cultures and time periods. And here's the key. When Jung talked about archetypes, he didn't just mean characters like the hero or the villain. He meant primordial psychological forces, abstract forms that shape how we see ourselves, others, and the world. They show up in dreams, myths, art, religion, and culture across time and space. Jung emphasized 4 key archetypes in particular: the self, the organizing center of the psyche, symbolizing wholeness and the goal of psychological growth. Then there's the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject or hide, including fears, desires, and instincts. There's also the persona, the social mask we wear to fit in with others. And finally, there's the anima animus, the unconscious opposite gender aspect of the psyche, shaping how we relate emotionally and creatively. These form the foundation of our inner life, but they also appear symbolically in stories, and that's where the more familiar character archetypes come in. You've probably seen these in movies or myths: the brave hero, the wise mentor, the mischievous trickster, the nurturing mother. These are expressions of the deeper archetypes that Jung described. They're cultural echoes of the psychological structures that we all share. And archetypes aren't just about stories. They shape how we see ourselves, how we navigate relationships, and even how we understand society. While according to Jung, archetypes come from the collective unconscious and are universal, complexes are personal. They're emotional patterns that develop around specific experiences or relationships and can dominate how we think and behave. Here are some common complexes in Jung's system. The mother complex involves intense feelings related to one's mother. This could mean idealizing her to an unrealistic degree, or it could involve resentment or unresolved conflicts. Either way, it can shape how you view authority figures or relationships. The inferiority complex is that persistent feeling of not being good enough. It can lead to low self-esteem, overcompensation, or avoiding challenges altogether. The power complex is an obsession with control or dominance. People with this complex might seem confident, but it often masks deep insecurity. Jung believed that becoming aware of these complexes and understanding how they influence us is key to personal growth. It's not about getting rid of them, it's about integrating them into a healthier sense of self. While Jung's theories are fascinating and have had a huge impact on culture and therapy, they're not without their critiques. The biggest critique is the lack of empirical evidence. Concepts like the collective unconscious and archetypes are hard to test scientifically. As we mentioned with Freud, modern psychology emphasizes evidence-based practices, and Jung's theories often don't meet those standards. Jung's ideas also lean heavily into spirituality and mysticism. While concepts like synchronicity, the idea that meaningful coincidences are connected, are intriguing, they don't have much scientific support. That said, Jung's influence goes beyond psychology. His ideas have shaped art, literature, film, and current psychological practices. Whether they're scientifically valid or not, they've left a lasting mark on how we understand the human experience. Let's do another attention check. Which of the following is an archetype described by Jung? A, the id, B, the superego, C, the shadow, or D, the pleasure principle? If you pick C, the shadow, you've got it. The shadow is one of Jung's most famous archetypes, representing the repressed or denied parts of ourselves, our fears, flaws, instincts, and desires. So now that we've explored Freud and Jung, let's take a look at some of the psychology tools that their work has been crucial to developing, projective tests. Freud and Jung gave us these big, sweeping ideas about the unconscious mind. But how do you actually measure something that by definition is hidden from our awareness? That's where projective tests come in. These tests were designed to uncover your deepest thoughts, feelings, and motivations. But here's the question. Do these tests really help us build helpful models about who we are? Or are they just creative exercises that are interesting but don't provide the deeper insights that we seek? Well, let's start by defining projective tests and then take a look at the most famous ones to see where they land. Projective tests are psychological tools that use ambiguous images or scenarios to get people to reveal their unconscious thoughts and feelings. The theory behind these tests comes from Freud and Jung, who, as we've been discussing, believed that much of what drives us is hidden beneath the surface of our conscious mind. When you're faced with something ambiguous, like a random ink blot or a vague picture, your mind fills in the blanks. And in doing so, the idea is that you're not just projecting random thoughts, you're revealing deep-seated emotions, desires, or conflicts. These tests were some of the earliest attempts to measure personality and unconscious processes. But while they're still culturally iconic, their scientific validity has been heavily debated. Let's start with one of the most famous projective tests, the Rorschach inkblot test. Developed by Hermann Rorschach in the 1920s, the test involves showing people a series of inkblots and asking them, "What do you see?" The idea is that your interpretations will reveal hidden aspects of your unconscious mind. At first, the Rorschach test was highly subjective. The psychologist would interpret your responses based on their own training and perspectives. Later, more structured scoring systems were developed to make the test more consistent. But even then, questions around reliability and validity remain. While the Rorschach test might not be the most scientifically rigorous tool, it's become an icon of psychology in pop culture. You've probably seen it in online content, movies, TV shows, or even art, because there's something undeniably intriguing about staring at a blot of ink and wondering what it really says about you. Next up is the Thematic Apperception Test, or TAT for short. Developed by Henry Murray and Christina Morgan in the 1930s, this test shows a subject ambiguous images of people in various situations. You might see a person staring out a window, or two people having a conversation, and your task is to create a story about what's happening. The idea is that the themes in your story, like power dynamics, relationships, or fears, reveal underlying aspects of your unconscious mind. For example, if you consistently create stories where characters feel abandoned or betrayed, it might suggest unresolved feelings in your own life. But like the Rorschach, the TAT has faced criticisms for its subjectivity and lack of scientific rigor. Different psychologists might interpret the same story in completely different ways. Despite that, it's still used in some therapeutic settings, though not so much for diagnosing disorders, but as a way to open up conversations and explore deeper emotions. Projective tests are fascinating, but as I've mentioned, they come with some serious limitations. First, there are reliability issues. If you take the test with two different psychologists, you might get two completely different interpretations. Even taking the test at different times can yield different results. Then there are validity concerns. Do these tests really measure what they claim to measure? There's limited evidence that projective tests can accurately diagnose mental health conditions or predict behavior. Cultural bias is another big problem. A psychologist's personal or cultural background can influence how they interpret your responses. And if you come from a different cultural background, your responses might not fit the psychologist's framework, leading to misunderstandings. Despite all this, projective tests remain iconic in psychology and pop culture. Let's take a moment to reflect. Have you ever taken a projective test, like the Rorschach or the TAT? Do you think ambiguous images can reveal something about your personality? Why or why not? How do you feel about using subjective tools to explore the unconscious mind? Whether you see these tests as insightful or just quirky psychological relics, they highlight our enduring fascination with trying to measure and understand the hidden parts of ourselves. Let's quickly recap the key points from today's lecture. Freud introduced us to the id, ego, and superego, along with his controversial ideas about psychosexual development. His concept of defense mechanisms, like repression, denial, and sublimation, are still part of how we talk about psychology today. Carl Jung expanded the idea of the unconscious with concepts like the collective unconscious and archetypes. His focus on universal symbols and emotional patterns called complexes added depth to how we think about personality. Finally, we explored projective tests, like the Rorschach inkblot test and the thematic apperception test, designed to reveal hidden aspects of the mind. While fascinating, these tests face significant criticisms for their subjectivity and lack of scientific rigor. While these theories and tests may seem outdated or flawed by today's scientific standards, they laid the groundwork for how we think about personality today. They opened the door to deeper questions about what shapes us, how we can measure personality, and how we understand the self. In our next lecture, we'll explore how modern psychology has built on, and in many cases moved beyond, these early theories. But before we wrap up, let's check your understanding with a couple of review questions. Which of the following concepts did Carl Jung introduce to explain universal symbols shared across cultures? Is it A, the id, B, the superego, C, archetypes, or D, psychosexual stages? If you picked C, archetypes, you're spot on. Jung believed these universal symbols shape how we think, feel, and behave. Which of the following is a common criticism of projective tests, like the Rorschach inkblot test and the TAT? A, they're too focused on behavior and ignore thoughts. B, they lack reliability and validity. C, they are overly standardized and rigid. Or D, they rely too heavily on statistical data. If you said B, you're correct. Projective tests often face criticism for their subjectivity and lack of consistent scientific support. Understanding personality is a journey. It is about exploring the forces that shape who we are, from our deepest unconscious desires to the universal symbols that connect us all. While Freud and Jung laid the groundwork, psychology continues to evolve, offering new ways to understand ourselves and each other. And so, as always, remember to stay curious, stay resilient, and above all, live life in flux. I'll see you in the next lecture.